User, you on?
Hello, yes, I'm on. Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome, Search Diehards, to the session this afternoon. We'll be talking about migration strategies for search to SharePoint 2013. So we'll specifically talk about SharePoint 2010, both fast and SharePoint search. We've had a couple questions, people interested in FSIS or ESP. If you fit into those categories, we're not going to cover those here, so you might want to find a different session.
Just out of curiosity, how many people were hoping to see earlier versions of SharePoint migration or old versions of fast migration? Okay, you're going to be sadly disappointed in the old fast version, and the other, you need to migrate to 2010. So we're going to pick it up at 2010 to 2013, just to be clear.
So if you are interested in those and want more information, you can shoot one of us an email and we'll get it directed to the correct people.
The fast ESP, correct.
Yes.
We're covering fast search for SharePoint and SharePoint search.
Okay. My name is Brent Groom. I've been with Microsoft since the FAST acquisition. Before that, I was in FAST consulting. Steve Kensley is a regional architect. Also many years of search experience with FAST. Okay, today we're going to cover a few things. We'll cover search migration overview, so you get a good big picture. Then we're going to do 2 demos, search with SharePoint 2010, and then fast search for SharePoint 2010. Then we'll have a discussion, Q&A. If you have any questions, you can either come up to the mic or we'll also check the tweet on SPC 154. Okay, important, at the end of the session, you will be able to identify the search migration strategies and options. You'll be able to outline those strategies for your organization, things that will work for you. And you'll be able to explain the SharePoint 2010 and fast search for SharePoint 2010 migration steps to 2013. Okay, this is a great slide. We could spend all day on it. I'd like to spend all day on it.
There was a session for that earlier, though.
There are other sessions. So some of these at the top 2, SPC 322, SPC 320, 2 sessions that are good to see. The main picture we want you to see is there's a great search engine in the middle. It's a combination of it's kind of the best of both worlds, the SharePoint search and fast search in the middle. On the side, 2 ends, you have your connectors that are still SharePoint that you're familiar with, and then we have a great UI that's built on top of SharePoint.
One thing that we want to point out about that fast search index is it's not a one-for-one from the SharePoint 2010 version. There have been a lot of optimizations for disk I/O and things like that that really make this more performant for your scenarios.
Absolutely. Yeah, the search engine itself, as Steve just said, the IOPS requirements are much lower. It's a great solution, as well as the disk-based requirements are smaller.
Okay, so the first question that you want to ask yourself is, where are you migrating from? We said right at the outset that we're not addressing fast search, we're not addressing fast ESP, which is the precursor product that was in existence when Microsoft bought FAST. We're also not addressing earlier versions of SharePoint than SharePoint 2010. But my question is, again, which version are people on? How many people were doing SharePoint search and are looking to migrate to 2013? Okay. How many are doing fast search for SharePoint and wanting to? Okay. Looks like there was some overlap there. Is that true? Overlap? Both? Okay. It was a lot of overlap. Okay. So we're going to be demonstrating both of those today. And then the next question that we're going to ask is, how much customization did you do? Would you categorize your implementation as a primarily out-of-the-box implementation, or were you doing a moderate level of UX customization, or did you do a lot of customization? How many of you are closer to out-of-the-box? Okay, all right. How many of you are doing heavy customization? Okay, okay, so we're going to be addressing both of those scenarios. Okay, yep, thank you. There's the clicker. Let's go forward. So the primary migration paths we have, the first one, and I should have changed the order on this slide, but I didn't. The first one is that you're going to look at the new features that are available in SharePoint 2013 search, and you're going to say, okay, great, query rules, result sets don't have direct analogies necessarily back on the previous products. And so you may choose to take your business requirements and things and go straight there. The second one is doing a search-first migration. This was a similar scenario that we had when we were doing the migration from into SharePoint 2010 and Fast Search for SharePoint 2010, where you would implement search, publish the service, and then consume it from the previous version. We are going to be demonstrating the migration from SharePoint Search. Excuse me, didn't mean to do that. And we're going to be demonstrating the migration from Fast Search for SharePoint. So those are the primary places we're going. One of the things I want to talk about that goes into your migration strategy is, where is your organization? There's sort of what we loosely call, this is not an official thing, but it's something that within services that we've come to be able to identify customers by where they are in the search maturity model. You've got your basic search, which are pretty close to out of the box, usually lower data volumes. I'll say less than 10 million to me is a lower data volume. Maybe one, maybe two data sources that you're crawling, but it's still a pretty small implementation. Might be 3 servers, that kind of a thing. When you get to enterprise search, you're usually talking about higher data volume, so somewhere between 10 and 100 million documents. You're also talking about up to 5, 6, 7 different data sources. You may have your intranet, your extranet. You'll have your SharePoint sites. You may have multiple farms that you're crawling. You may have BCS connectivity going into databases, things like that. And you may have a whole bunch of things that you're exposing within your organization. The next level you get to are for those of you who are writing a lot of code and doing heavy customization. Your search-driven application may or may not even look like a search page anymore. It may just be embedded as a component within a larger application. And then you get to a place where there are multiple search applications all feeding off the same index. And this is usually larger, more established organizations who are used to doing search, and they're used to doing the knowledge management and the information architecture that goes with that, because there are things that you have to coordinate when you have one index and a whole bunch of search applications hitting that one index. Now, there are some features in 2013 that really make that scenario nice. There's a lot of the tenant things that you can do around having tenant-specific index schema information, stuff like that. Just out of curiosity, based on that loose categorization, how many of you would characterize yourself as basic search kind of people? Okay, a couple. Enterprise search? Most of you? Okay. Search-driven applications, I'm expecting to see your heavy customization people on that one. Anybody have multiple search applications going in your environment? Okay, one? Okay, cool. We'll get to that. So, pictorially speaking, you can land on SharePoint 2013 and just begin to re-implement there. We'll talk about reasons why for each of these. The second thing that you could do would be the search-first migration, where you implement the search and then publish the service and consume it on the older version. The third one is the one that I'll be demonstrating, which is the from SharePoint search migration. And you'll notice that that arrow stopped somewhat short of the SharePoint 2013. The reason for that is that we've got what we call SharePoint 2010 mode. Now, how many of you remember the pink bar at the top of the screen that he pointed out during the keynote when he said, thank you, okay. That's what we're talking about here. You've migrated over, you're running on SharePoint 2013, but it is your 2010 site. I mean, there are some things that, obviously, in the details are a couple of minor things that will be a little bit different. But what you're doing is you're running your 2010 site as it was on 2013. Then you go through the process of clicking the link that was on that pink banner, and you migrate up to SharePoint 2013. This, of course, can be scripted and things like that. The last path is when we come from Fast Search for SharePoint. Again, we're on SharePoint 2010. We're migrating. It's, again, I didn't mention it before, but it's a backup restore database kind of scenario. You run a PowerShell commandlet. You have to do a little bit of scripting. And then you land in that 2010 mode search center. Now, the thing that you're thinking is, it's not the same functionality that we had coming from SharePoint Search. There's more stuff that came from Fast. It is normalized basically to the SharePoint 2010 functionality. So when you go that route, there are things that you'll want to take directly from Fast Search over, and this is usually done through custom programming. Okay? This is something that Brent's going to talk about at great length. Okay, next. Sorry, I'm pointing there, but I should be pointing down here. So this just kind of gives you the whole picture again. Okay. So why you might consider doing... Sorry? Oh, so I'm stepping in. Yep. There you go.
No, it's all good. Okay. So these next 3 slides are critical to listen to. Okay? There are 5 slides that are most important in this whole presentation. So we're going to cover 3 of them right now. Then Steve will cover the other 2 in a little while after the demos. So this first one, why might you consider search first migration? So this is the scenario with Microsoft MSIT. We have an intranet site internal that has our central search space, and then we have lots of search centers around the company as well. And they all have different plans, different timelines of when they want to move to 2013. So in this situation, we would consider, and we chose the path of search first migration. And so you stand up the services in 2013, and then you point your 2010 environments to that. So it lets the different groups move at their own pace. So that's one scenario. Another reason, it may be very difficult for you to migrate them all at once. Another reason that is important, we didn't put on the slide, but that's key, we talked about earlier, the IOPS and the performance benefits that you get with SharePoint Search 2013 are huge. And so your IOPS requirements are much lower, your disk requirements are lower. So you may be in a situation now in 2010. Yes?
The question was, if you're on Fast Search for SharePoint, will you see an increase for speed going to SharePoint 2013 search? Just for the recording. I don't know that you're going to see an increase in speed on the performance of that from a query standpoint, but because of the lower IOPS, you're going to have more efficient operational aspects, your crawls and your indexing and things. You're still subject to your entire infrastructure, but the disk I/O, which was the major, I mean, that's the iceberg in the Atlantic for you if you're, doing this. That's the big thing that you really needed to get around, and it's hugely improved in 2013.
Right. So if you're in a situation where your SAN is maxed out on your IOPS and you're having a battle with that group, you may consider going to 2013 just for the search piece and do a search first migration in that scenario.
Now, as an example of this is what MSIT is doing. The number that we were using when we were rehearsing this was about a dozen sites, and we found out that, well, actually we have about 30 internal search sites that are all on SharePoint 2010, and yet we're doing this exact strategy within MSIT.
Okay. So this next one, why you might consider going down the migration path and using the migration scenarios and tools that we're going to talk about. So you have a mostly out-of-the-box search center. You may have many content sources, right? You could have 30 different content sources. You have different crawl rules associated with them, different crawl schedules. Lots of complexity maybe to set those up. Another scenario, you may have a complex index schema. So lots of managed properties, crawl properties, and mappings. And I know this doesn't apply to anyone here, but there's the possibility that these things weren't documented, and it was kind of done ad hoc and say, oh, we'll do that later, we'll document it. And
clearly everyone here documented and scripted everything and made it reproducible, right? Right, okay.
So, yeah, I asked that question to, well, we won't go there. Okay, we'll go ahead. Sorry. All right. So this last slide, why you might consider re-implementing. And so some shops, you do things through PowerShell. You have a very rigorous process. You have everything automated. And so in that scenario, you could go through the same process on 2013, implement everything, do all your coded to the 2013 API. So in that case, you've got it well documented. You go ahead and re-implement it in 2013 APIs. A lot of customers have detailed runbooks, and so they run through all the steps. They have a 100-page runbook, and they go through all the steps manually. Boom, boom, boom. And if that's your situation, you know your requirements, you can change that runbook straight to 2013, and there may be a lot of value just going straight with the re-implementation in that scenario. Another reason for implementation, if you have an out-of-the-box search center, if you have 2 crawled content sources, very minimal index schema changes, a migration path probably isn't the best choice. Just go ahead, stand up 2013, and just start using it, make those couple tweaks, and you're off and running. Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Steve.
Okay.
And we'll go through a demo.
All right. So, sorry, I'm just warming up that.
Do we have any questions before we jump into the demo?
Questions, comments? Yes.
The question is, does this apply to both on-site, on-premises, as well as on cloud?
What we're talking about today is on-prem. There was a session immediately before lunch today that was on search scenarios that mix hybrid scenarios between on-prem and in the cloud. And I highly recommend that you go back and view that one. You're not migrating directly from where you were. You're coming over to on-prem, and then there are strategies to go from on-prem to the cloud. But there's a lot that you don't have to do when you get to the cloud with search, because they're handling the crawls and they're handling all of that stuff for you. You go in and manage your tenant, but you're not actually having to do some of the things that we're looking at here today. So this is primarily an on-prem scenario for us. Okay, so, sorry, next slide. So this is the portion of the picture that we're doing right now. We're going to go through those steps, and there are basically 4 of them. Sorry, I can go back to that if you like a picture. Here, let me do that. Okay, sorry. I realized there was a flash before as I was clicking. Okay. So there are 4 basic steps. You're going to do a backup and restore on the database. The first one is the backup on SharePoint 2010 over on the left. The second step is to do the restore. I'm using SQL Server 2012. There are other versions supported, but that's the one that we're going to be looking at today. You restore the databases, you grant the roles to your service. We're going to look at all of these scripts in detail, so this is just the roadmap for what we're doing. And then we're going to go to SharePoint 2013. We're going to run a PowerShell script that's going to restore that search service application, and we're going to mount the content database. That's where the magic happens, where we're actually the restore database and the restore SSA are where the magic happens, where the internal database schemas get changed and stuff like that, and we actually get moved over. Then we're going to go and do the upgrade, the arrow part to the right, to get the search page moved from 2010 mode on 2013 over to SharePoint 2013 full on. So that's what we're going to do. Whoops, wrong slot, wrong direction. So from here, I'm going to jump into onto the screen, and so I've done the backup. This is the pre-cooked part of the cooking show where I pull it already done out of the oven. I've done that backup already. I've got a couple of files, and we're going to move them over to the right database on my SQL Server 2012 instance. You can see the highlighted part where it says MS SQL 11. That's the part that's telling us it's actually SQL Server 2012. Okay, so going on to my SQL Server box, I am going to use the magnifier heavily, but that's the screen that we're looking at. Okay. Let's go in and slide to the right. Okay, whoops, a little slower, there we go. So I've created this scripts directory for doing this demo, and in it I've got a bunch of SQL Server scripts. I had this backup file here. I'm going to edit that, and you'll see that what I'm doing is I'm just copying the backup files that I pulled over from the other database. I'm putting them in that SQL Server backup directory. And I have one called Intranet Content 01, and I got another one called Search Service Application DB. Clear, simple, just copying files over so I can do a restore. I'll close that up. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go into the SQL Server Management Studio. I'm going to bounce back out, which I have preloaded. I will go back in. I will magnify again, sorry. There we go. And so we're going to run 3 scripts. We said first we were going to restore the database for our administration, our search administration. Second, we're going to go in and restore the content database. And the third thing is we're going to grant the roles. Now, those of you who are speed readers, memorize those 3 commands. There's not that much here. This is a straight database or restore database command. Sorry, trying not to do that. Here's my search service application DB. I'm renaming it Upgrade Admin Search Database because I'm a little bit backwards. That should have been Upgrade Search Admin Database. But that's scripted, and it will work. The next thing we do is we run the exact same command, but on the other database. So all we're doing is we're bringing the databases over first. Simple. I mean, you're falling asleep at this point going, why is this guy showing me restore database commands? Because this is all there is to it. You know, it's pretty straightforward. Then the third thing we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to grant database owner to, in this case, my user is virtual SharePoint service. And I'm going to do that for the upgrade admin search DB and the upgrade content database. So far, have I lost anybody? I mean, we're still, I mean, have you fallen asleep yet? Yes? No? Okay, sorry. There's not that much to that part. That's the main thing. Now, so what I would do is I would literally execute, execute, and execute. And that would take probably on the order of about 1.5 minutes, but I've already done this. This is part of the pre-cookedness of that. So far so good. We've taken care of 2 of the boxes on our 4-box steps, okay? Pretty straightforward. All right, so then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over from my SQL server over to my SharePoint box, and let me minimize that. I copied the same stuff over, and instead of running SQL Server Management Studio, I'm going to run PowerShell ISE, and I'm going to, again, zoom here. Let me zoom so that you can see where we're going here. Okay, so all the script is doing, there are 3 main commands at the end that this is setting up. The first thing that we're doing is we're setting a bunch of environment things, my accounts, my database names, et cetera, et cetera. We do a little bit of a trick here to get the password so that you don't have to log in. I mean, so that you don't have to put your password in clear text. Then we go out and we get the managed account for that. And with that managed account, we can then get the service application pool. Okay? So we're going to go out there. That was part of what we configured above. We get our search server instance. And then we come down to the meat of this. And I'm going to show you a slide with this on it later. But this is one of those key commands. This is the one where we're actually restoring the search service application. Okay? I misspoke earlier. I will correct that in a moment. The magic occurs all in the PowerShell script. I said it happened on the mount database. It doesn't happen on the mount database. It happens on the mount here when we go into SharePoint. So this is where we restore. This is where we turn the 2010 schema into the 2013 schema, and all the information gets mapped over correctly. Again, this is SharePoint search, pretty straightforward, one-to-one. Everything else in this script was about setting up for the application pool, excuse me, you know, getting the search service instance, the database name, pretty straightforward on that command. It's just a simple PowerShell command, right? Okay. The second big thing is the proxy. We set up the proxy service that goes with it for the SSA. And again, you're still thinking, okay, this is pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. That's our point. It's that simple. This is not rocket science that we're talking about here. This is the other piece of magic where we mount the content database. If this detects that it's in a 2010 database that we're mounting, this is where it mucks around and redoes the schema. Okay? This is where the other magic happened. And then it outputs this. This takes about 6 or 7 minutes on my poor little VM. So this is why we pre-cooked all of this stuff. Okay. So where did let's see. Okay, so we're here. We ran that. Let's see. Hang on a second. I need to get back to this. I'm going to go back to normal. Let's see. Sorry, that's my desktop. That's not what I was looking for. I was looking for that one. Okay, so what happens after we've run all of that? You'll have this script if you download the slides, by the way. What happens there is you get access to central admin. You get, okay, I have a top-level site called top-level site. It's actually not my top-level site. If you look at it, it's just a site called top. But then I've got the data that we brought in. Okay? So this data was actually part of the content that was migrated in. The other site was not. You can tell by the pink bar that we're in that 2010 mode. Sorry, question? No? Just, okay, sorry, hand in the air, I thought. Okay, and then there's your basic search page. This looks a lot like 2010. It should look like 2010. This is exactly what you had running there. You go in, if you look at the content database, you see, okay, here's my upgrade content database. That's what I named it in the script. I had 5 site collections that came across. I go back. I go in and I look at my managed search service application. And I come in and I realize where to go? Right here. I've got my search service application. I called it upgrade. It's probably a poor choice of name because it sounds like if you click on it, it will do the upgrade. But then we're in managing. This is part of what you don't get when you go to the cloud because you're not going to get in and see your content sources and stuff like that. So just to go back and point out what's happening there. So in this, again, on-prem situation, I've got my service account that I'd configured. I've got a single server implementation where you will see your entire farm set up here for what service is running where, what partitions you have, what replicas you have. In the old fast language, we used to call them rows and columns. Now we call them replicas or partitions and replicas. A row is a replica if you're making that translation. And then you've got the databases if you look back at the architecture slide, there were a couple of different databases down here. You'll see those listed here. The link database, the crawl database, the analytics, which is kind of the new one, and then the basic administration one. So let's go in and take a look at our content sources, and we'll see this one called local SharePoint sites. This is one that was migrated in. I had a situation where I had a site up already, and I was just migrating in some of the content. Intranet and portal were things that I already had there in place. So you'll see that I've already done a crawl. I did that the other day. But let's go in and look at the definition of that. And I apologize for the size of that. Let's go in and zoom down a little. So if this was an actual content migration as opposed to a search migration, I would have cleaned up this. I would have named my local machine and done all the same names like you would do in a real migration, and I didn't. But you'll see that the root of the local server actually came across and was put in. And the names are there. So if you had a whole bunch of different content sources, they would all get migrated over. Okay, let's go back out. And so we'll go back over and take a look. So we've got a training site. This was the content that came in. And we have our search center. Now, you'll get scopes here. The scopes that you had in SharePoint 2010 don't migrate all the way to SharePoint 2013 because the mechanism isn't done the same way anymore. You would set up query rules for that. But if you had scopes, you would still see them here. Okay, for those of you, sorry, question? These are fast scopes that I'd be talking about. No, it would be changed under the covers, but you would have what you had before. This is where the question was: are we using FQL under the covers for those scopes, and would that still be there? Again, for the recording. This is where we're talking about mapping your requirements over, and why it's a little bit difficult to grab everything and pull it through, because the changes are significant, and there are things that don't map with the new UX stuff. The query rules is a completely new concept. The result sets are a completely new concept. Now, underneath the covers, it's actually built on some technology that was done for other products within the line, FSIS, if you're familiar with it. And so there were some things that were built on top of that. But those are intended to be done at the level that an administrator or a power user could do it, rather than having to get a programmer involved. So, okay, so I should have warmed this up again a little bit, but my favorite search is because I'll get most of my documents that way, or I can search for baseball. And so we think, okay, great, no big deal. Ran a couple of scripts in SQL. I ran a PowerShell script that didn't look too long. It's about 40 lines with spaces and comments. And I got what I had before. Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to kick off the migration. This is going to take a couple minutes, so we'll come back to this at the end of Brent's demonstration. But I'll show you the steps. We click search now. It says prepare for takeoff. So you can start this. And it says, do you really want to do this? Yeah, okay, we want to upgrade the site collection. Remember, your search center is just a site collection. And it comes in, and I want to show you this one a little bit. Let me do that. Okay, we think you'll love it, but again, it says, are you really sure? I liken this to I'm from Minnesota, and if somebody asks you if you would like something, they say it 3 times to you, and you have to turn them down 3 times, otherwise you really want it. Are you sure you don't want some more? Are you sure you don't want some more? Really? You can have some more if you'd like it. If you say no all 3 times, then that means it. You really mean no. So we're going to say, nope, I'm ready. And so this is going to take a little bit, and this is where we will jump back to Brent, and then at the end we'll look at that. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
That's all right.
So what Brent just flipped through were the slides that if we lost network connectivity, I would have walked you through to look at those scripts. So you'll have them. If you download the deck, you'll get them, and have at it.
Okay, next demo. Fast search for SharePoint migration. So quick overview, what we're going to see. We're going to see the same thing that Steve just showed, where you go into this 2010 mode. You're sitting in 2013, but you're running basically 2010 bits still. So you get the same experience there. This other path, we're not going to talk about through the demo, but we have a slide where we will show step D here, where they're really just PowerShell scripts that are on a TechNet that will help you with your configuration. They're not a migration thing, but there are configuration scripts out there to assist you. Okay, same 4 boxes, slight differences from SharePoint Search 2010. You notice in the first box, we have 4 databases as opposed to the 2. The key ones are the top 3 here. So you have a fast search admin database, you have your content SSA, and you have your query SSA. Those that have used fast FS for SharePoint, you remember we had 2 SSAs, right? So each of those required their own database. With 2013, there's 1 database, just 1 SSA. Good news. But the trick is with the migration for fast is we have to take those 3 different databases and the schemas and kind of bring them down to the same schema that Steve showed with the SSA from SharePoint Search 2010. Okay? So that's one piece that the migration tool does. There's one other thing that happens out of band. That's on the schema side, the managed properties and crawl properties. We had some extra functionality and features in fast search for SharePoint. Well, if you take those features, there's not a one-to-one mapping down to the schema for SharePoint 2010. And so there's some PowerShell that lets you run that kind of as a separate process. And the migration tool handles that for you. You don't have to worry about it. But it's just so you're aware of what's kind of different between the two paths. Right, then we go over to our 2012 SQL Server, restore these 3 databases. Then you execute the migration script. And then at some point, you upgrade the sites into your 2013. Yes? So the question is, will this work if we use the fast crawler? So you're talking about the fast enterprise crawler? Yep, so that's a good question. So if you look at the features and the connectors on SharePoint 2013, the enterprise crawler it's not one of the options. And so you have to use the out-of-the-box SharePoint crawler for crawling your websites. Okay. All right, so this just is a summary again. You back up the databases. The migration restores the 3 databases automatically. So I just want to kind of emphasize that this process is actually very easy to do. I'll show you 2 PowerShell commands that kick everything off for you. One thing that is important to note, in both migration scenarios, you see the green here that's highlighted. So you can only run these things once. Of course, you can run it twice, but you need to know what the side effects are. So every time you run it, before you run it, you need to make sure that your SSA is deleted. Or the scripts actually will delete those, but you need to be aware. So if you set up content sources, anything in there, when you run this migration again, you'll lose any settings. Then key things afterward, this applies to both scenarios as well. When you run the migration, it gives you a single node search instance. Okay? So you're left, it's an exercise. You need to set up the topology. You may have the partitions and replicas you need to configure that. Okay. So this is the first command that you run. This gets executed on the SQL server. So you run this setup env PowerShell and give it these 3 parameters, SQL only, restore DB, and run all scripts. Okay. And then you jump over to your SharePoint server and you run this command, run all scripts, SP only.
Painfully simple. Everybody's going, okay,
We're done.
That's the payoff.
So I want to be clear. These are what you're going to see. These scripts are pre-release. They are not released to the public yet. They will be released come GA, and they should be available on TechNet, Script Center, and the Code Gallery for download from that location. So you may see the parameters and the name change a little bit, but it's still, just know it's very, very simple to do. Okay? And we'll skip that. We'll jump over to the actual live demo. So this is pre-canned as well. I've done a lot of the work already. It takes about 7 or 8 minutes to run through it, to restore the databases, to bring everything in line, to run that restore command, and then to actually create a search center in 14.5 mode, or this 2010 mode, and then upgrade that search center into 2013. So all those steps have already taken place, and I'm going to show you, we'll just do a query. I'll show you a best bet query that came all the way from the fast search for SharePoint 2010 in the databases there, and came all the way across, and we'll look at that best bet in 2013 Search Center. Okay? So a quick view here. It looks complex, but you know, the highlighted script right there is really your entry point, and that's the only thing you have to worry about. There are these other supporting scripts. You don't need to worry about a lot. You know, there's a database directory. We're going to jump into, this is looking at the setup env script, and there's a section there where you need to change the variable names so that you get your correct database name, your backup file name, but it's a very small section, right? So, and it's clearly labeled start variable changes below this line, and then we scroll down, no changes needed below this line. So very simple, 20 lines or so that you modify and look at, and just validate. Okay, I'm going to show you this is the final output. There's a supplementary script in this scenario to kind of validate that the system worked. And so this shows you that the test passed. There were 78 tests that were checked. A lot of them were checking managed properties, the crawl properties, make sure those mappings took place. And then there are some queries that are executed, some best bets, visual best bets. You can see here, you know, here's picture, Windows 8. So it checks to see if that you execute that query, see if it comes back correctly. Yes?
Looks like your step is more like a service application level. Where does that tie into the best bet, which is at the site selection level? They have a couple search sites. Where does that tie in?
So the question is, this looks like it's at the service application level, and for best bets, where does it tie in if you're at the site level? So there are options on that, and the best bets will come across. There are some nuances there, for sure, but come GA, those should be covered. So I'm going to just go back in time so you can kind of see what took place. This was a query against the 2013 Search Center. We just jump back up. So now this was the same test against the 2010 mode Search Center. And then we'll just go back in time a little bit more. And you can see this 8A created our initial Search Center. You pass in a flag to say create it in compatibility mode, which is the 2010 mode. So you can use these scripts as reference as well, of course, if you're going to automate these steps yourself. We'll go back in time a little more. And this is the output from running the migration. And it was doing the mapping and the crawl properties, the managed properties. And I don't know that we'll bore you anymore with this stuff. This is just the output. So
The idea is that these scripts are something that are going to be provided by Microsoft and supported by the product group going forward. And so we're looking at an early version of them right now. But this is something that if you're coming off of Fast Search for SharePoint and you want to do this migration step, you can use this script, tweak just that one section for your variables, and then get the entire thing automated for you.
yeah, very good. So recap the four squares here. So you get your databases, restore, and then you finally go through your upgrade on the content sources on your content sites. All right.
Okay, so
Turn it over to Steve.
So the next, Brent referred earlier to 5 key slides. These are the other ones. These are features that correspond to something that existed previously in SharePoint 2010 or in Fast Search for SharePoint. There are a couple of caveats at the end here. You've got crawled properties still, content sources, crawl rules, crawl schedules, all of those kinds of things. I'm not going to read it for you. Down at the bottom, we've got visual best bets. They come across, this is a Fast Search for SharePoint concept for those of you who aren't familiar with them. They're converted to regular best bets, which operate differently. And synonyms, which in Fast Search for SharePoint are used for query expansion, are applied to best bets. So there's a difference in functionality there. It doesn't map one-to-one, but there's a similar feature, a familiar feature there. Got it? I saw a couple of cameras go up. Okay. Again, all of the slides for the show, for the entire conference, are available to you. You want me to go back one? Okay, I'll go back one. Again, we'll tell you where to find more information about this stuff on TechNet at the end. We'll have some things that you can bing at the end to go get the detailed list. These are not meant to be exhaustive lists. These are just some of the highlights and things. Again, best bets, visual best bets. It's a new approach, but they were familiar concepts. Promotions and demotions would be something that you would have to do via query rules in 2013. Scaling up, there was something in Fast Search for SharePoint called high density mode. Anybody familiar with that? Yes? No? Okay, so the idea was you would get more data on your servers by doing some low-level configurations. We're not offering that in SharePoint 2013. What you're going to want to do is scale out. There are sizing recommendations. There's a capacity planning session. I think it's tomorrow. We'll point it out at the end. That you'll want to go to if you're working with higher volumes of data. So we scale out instead of scaling up. Synonyms, again, become query rules. Scopes work in SharePoint 2010 mode, which is that interim mode, but then you have to implement query rules to get that kind of functionality. You start to see some of the reasoning behind why we said earlier, if you've got your business requirements well documented and you've got your implementation scripted, there are some things that you will do differently here. So these are some of the reasons why we said what we did earlier. If you've got a lot of customizations on your search center, you're going to be using the new application development model anyway. How many of you have seen any of the information on the new app dev model? It's all client-side based rather than going back and working on the server. It's HTML, it's all JavaScript. And your pipeline extensibility. How many of you are working with pipeline extensibility? Great. How many of you are planning on going, well, never mind. Okay. It's called content enrichment now, and it's a web service call rather than a command line call out. So you're going to have a similar thing going on there. One major difference here is that with pipeline extensibility, you're working with crawled properties, which means you need the property set ID, the name, as well as the type. On content enrichment, you're working with managed properties. So you're thinking differently than you were before when you're working with content enrichment. Okay, again, you want more? Bing SharePoint 2013 changes. Okay, I'm supposed to put URLs up, and I said no, because nobody can ever remember. It was C45XK3, not 8. Okay, so just Bing that, and you'll get more information at your top couple of links.
Okay. So, sorry, we got to jump back. Everything that I showed you could have just been screen captures, so I have to show you something live at least. So this is a query for a best bet that came out, actually it was a visual best bet that came out of 2010 and then got carried all the way through. So search for W8. And then my core VM, then it comes back. So there, it's actually live.
Okay. I also promised that I would show what the upgrade process looked like.
Oh,
So
yeah,
we need
we
to
should
jump
come back.
over.
All
Yeah,
right, go
no,
ahead.
sorry. All that careful rehearsing that we did. I live in North Carolina. Brent lives in Utah. So, naturally we were in the same place. Okay, so we clicked on the pink bar where it said do all the setup and everything, and it said, okay, come back in a little bit. This is what it comes back to. It says, great, it completed successfully. I've got this what's new, and let's see the new site down here over on the right. Of course, you can read that in the back. And we click on that, and boom. We go, okay, great. Not that big a deal. New look and feel. Let's see how badly oh, there we go. It's thinking. It's thinking. Okay, it's going to take a moment. I'm supposed to refresh this, but I can't actually refresh it without missing that interim screen that you're going to want to look at. That interim screen, by the way, that process of clicking on the pink bar has nothing to do with search. That's just any site migration, site collection migration. Excuse me, I misspoke there. So this will come back in a moment. And my poor little laptop, they threatened our connectivity on Monday and said that the connectivity to our external demos wasn't there, so now we're running locally. There it is. Okay. And you get all the wonderful things like the pop-up, and there you go. The rollovers and let's do baseball again. There we go. Okay. We're there. All right.
Okay, these are the three scripts, or not the three. These are three scripts that exist today out on TechNet. So maintain properties, that lets you do your managed properties, your crawl properties, and the mapping between them. So you set up an XML file, run the script pointing at the XML file, and it'll create it for you. Import thesaurus, and then import query rules. Those both act off of CSV files. So you can bring that in. These are not part of migration. These are configuration things that take you straight into 2013. So you'd bypass the 2010 mode. And in this case, you can Bing SPC. Sorry, it should be SP 2013 ES. So it's SharePoint 2013 ES for enterprise search. We'll update that
Typo
slide.
alert.
That's right.
Question.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Yes, in all
Good.
migration
Repeat.
scenarios. Sorry,
So,
the question is, do you lose the index when you do your migration from Fast Search for SharePoint? It's worse than that. You lose it no matter where you came from. You have to recrawl. So we're talking about configuration migration, not index migration. I had done a crawl on the content source that I migrated and then did a search.
Good question. Okay, so now you should be able to identify the search migration strategies. You should be able to outline the strategies that will apply to you. It may be, a couple of things that we've talked about. You may do a migration. You may do search first, and you may also combine and do some re-implement. So it could be all of them, but you should be aware now of, have an idea of what applies to your organization and your situation. And specifically with the SharePoint 2010 search and Fast Search for SharePoint 2010, you should be able to explain those migration steps and understand how simple they are.
Understand that nobody's going to be offended if you look at this and ask the question, well, why should I do that if I have my stuff well documented and automated and stuff? Okay? Going straight to 2013 is a perfectly viable choice. Again, you have to weigh the different scenarios. So nobody's going to be offended if you say, okay, well, I'm not going to do any of this migration stuff. We're going to go straight there. It's whatever works for your business scenario.
Okay, to wrap up, so on this slide, these are other things that you can Bing. So another typo, SP 2013 ES. Yes. Can you hear that?
So the question was, if you're talking about a tool that will synchronize between two different farms. So you're looking for a tool that's going to keep two in sync for, like, say, disaster recovery scenario or something. Is that correct? I can't answer that. We'll have to look it up. Let's get your information. We'll get back to you later. Sorry. Yes. You're doing a standard installation on the product. It's SharePoint installation. The question was, in a locked-down enterprise environment, I work with government customers, and they're offline all the time anyway. They do things where the firewalls get tightened down and stuff like that. Yeah, it's just standard product installation that you're doing this. The search migration is part of your overall SharePoint migration. It's not. Question?
Since you bring over the databases, if you are already in high density mode, what do you need to configure?
The question is, if you're in high density mode already and you're migrating the databases, what do we have to do differently here?
The databases that you carry over in the scenarios, they already have high density.
Okay, if we're in high density mode and we do the migration, the databases have the information. You're saying, I'm going to correct the premise of the question. The information for doing high density mode is not in the database. So it's not there. It's actually in the configuration files on the server, on the fast search for SharePoint. It's not in the database. So what we're bringing over are the components that we're talking about, content sources and things like that. There is no equivalent of high density mode in SharePoint 2013. So yeah, you want to go to the capacity planning session. Look that one up. Question on the left. When you say relevancy, what? Oh, so the question is, when we migrate, do we lose the relevancy, or is it blown away? We're using an out-of-the-box relevancy with SharePoint 2013. There are ways to go in and it's tuned a whole different way now, where if we go back to the architecture slide, go back and look at that, you'll see the feedback loop from the user information, and that comes back into a database that's used, the analytics that help tune what comes up on the screen. When you do a search, it's influenced by what other people have done. So if everybody searches for football and everybody clicked on the Green Bay Packers or some team like that, then that would eventually get more weight, and you would see that one come up or as a recommended document, and it would be done that way. What specific relevancy feature are you looking for? We can take that offline, but if you're looking for a particular one. Yeah, the analytics are much more complex and much more sophisticated in 2013 that you get for the analytics for that.
Yeah, now you have result blocks, result sources,
Yeah.
query rules, a lot more
Yeah.
features and functionality there to learn about and play with.
Yeah, but it's going to have to get regenerated by user use. Okay.
2 questions?
Again, so the rank profile.
The rank profile comes right over. You have to re-implement the rank model. This is the concept, but requires re-implementation.
I'll repeat that. For those of you who are familiar with rank profiles and fast search for SharePoint, there's a new thing called a rank model, and you have to re-implement that in SharePoint 2013 if you want to go. It's not directly migrated. Okay.
Do you have a question? Those don't come across. No. Good question. So yeah, so if you query SP 2013 ES, then you'll get those 3 scripts. You also get this survival guide, search survival guide. I don't know if you've used that for fast search for SharePoint 2010. It's a great reference on the TechNet wiki that you can update yourselves. A lot of good information there, and I just started this page, Survival Guide for 2013 search. So please add to it, update it. Let's make that a great place where we can do wiki things and update this doc.
So there were a couple of slides earlier where we started listing familiar features and things that had a new approach. Look at SharePoint 2013, what's new in search, and you'll get a lot more detail there. So, question here, then here. Oh, when you migrate over, you're going. The question is, if you have a single fast server, do you have to migrate to the fast farm? Do you have to migrate to the same footprint for your server configuration? The answer is no, because you're going to have to build up from basically a single node install that you're migrating to. Then you're going to apply your topology. So the topology is not actually migrated over. If that answers your question.
Yeah. So I would attend the capacity planning session, and then you'll get an idea of where the mapping. In some cases, it may be one-to-one, but hopefully you have a smaller footprint on hardware requirements.
The farm level conversation is best handled at the capacity session. I mean, anything I say now is going to be just the merest thin layer off the top. I'll say this off the top. With high density mode being gone, we've talked about that a lot. You're going to be thinking about scaling out more if you were in a high density mode configuration previously. So, and there was a question here. Yes. 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 You migrated the database. The 4 steps were to back up your database, to restore your database.
So that's just SQL
to SQL.
2012 commands.
Then you go into the PowerShell script, which is the 3rd step, and that's where we had the 2 restore commands. That's where the magic happened, and I misspoke, and I said the magic happened earlier. The magic is in step 3 in the PowerShell, where we restored the SSA, and we mounted the content database. That's where all of the schema changes occurred. And so in there, you're creating the SSA after you've brought the database over.
So
you restore the database, just the database. Then you go into PowerShell and restore the SSA. Sorry, I apologize for that not being clear. Okay.
Other questions? Okay. So we recommend a few of these hands-on labs, introduction to search, using connectors and BCS. Query rules, definitely, if you can, look at the query rules and see the functionality there. And then some other search-related sessions. 2 of these have already occurred. What's new in search? If you haven't seen that, go ahead and listen to that excellent session by Jim and Glenn. And then on Monday as well, Thomas Mulbach and Runa, search architecture. 2 sessions to really get a good overview and understanding of the search in 2013.
And the woman who asked the question about sizing is going to miss this. Hopefully she'll find the overview capacity planning session, which is today at 5 o'clock. So that'll be key for answering all of those questions.
And then there's the last one there, relevancy. So tomorrow at 5 o'clock is a relevancy session, so you can attend that.
Okay, question over here?
That's correct.
So the question was, if you're doing search first migration and you have SharePoint 2010, fast search for SharePoint 2010, just SharePoint 2010. Okay.
And then the question is, can those scopes be modified? And I believe the answer is they cannot be modified.
Are they brought over though?
They will be brought over. They'll be migrated, but they're in a read-only mode at that point. There's no functionality to actually make changes to those.
Can you speak up? Or speak to me and I'll repeat. Okay, so the question, or the statement was that the scopes work as long as you're in the SharePoint 2010 mode on 2013, but not when you go to 2013 mode. Question?
A little bit more in synonyms. Synonym seems to be implemented differently in SharePoint 2010 and password.
Same name, different features. The name is the same, but the features are different.
Can you talk about what happens in both cases during migration?
During migration, synonyms are converted over to be applied to best bets rather than as query expansion. So in Fast Search for SharePoint, you had a dictionary of synonyms that you applied. You did a query, it hit one of those terms that would expand your query out. That's no longer happening. You're taking the synonyms that you've configured and they're coming over and they're applied as best bets to those particular, those best bets. And so you'll see when those terms come up, you'll see them hit on multiple terms for a best bet.
That's good.
Okay? Okay, 2 more questions. Start here.
So the question is, if you don't have visual best bets set up, does it create them automatically? Maybe. I don't know. I don't understand the question, I guess. Sorry.
Get us your contact information. We'll get back to you. I don't know the answer to it. Remember, a best bet is you're looking at this is a result that I want to have come up. If all you have is a synonym, there's no result that you've mapped it to. So at first blush, I would say no, but it's an uninformed answer. I need to get it back to you. Okay. Synonyms, it's the same name. It's a different feature. It's a different feature.
So in that scenario, you would want to probably look at the thesaurus script that's out on TechNet, and then that can take your 2010, your Fast Search for SharePoint 2010 thesaurus and synonyms and everything, and then bringing them, straight into 2013 mode, and having the same exact functionality in 2013, and then you bypass the loss of functionality through that 2010 mode.
Yeah, that was the one that he mentioned earlier that you can bring. Okay?
Yes.
Okay. .2010 mode, the question is, if you can't modify scopes and you're going to be running for a medium to longer term in 2010 mode, what are my options? Okay. I don't have a good answer for you. The functionality that's being added to SharePoint 2013 for doing the query rules and to present things that way is the direction that we've gone. So you're looking at what you can do with the query rules and things like that in 2013 mode. The 2010 is meant primarily as a migration path and an upgrade path through if you want to do that. But this is one of the reasons why we emphasized early on that your particular situation might be to go to 2013 and implement there based on your business requirements. This is exactly one of those kinds of scenarios where I know what my requirements are. I need to filter things this way on my searches. Forget the fact that it's done as a scope. How is it done over here and to implement that? In many cases, that is our recommendation, is that you re-implement it, you look at the new capabilities and do it that way. It's a significant change, and it was not intended to be a one-to-one mapping back to Fast Search for SharePoint. It's a whole new world of functionality, which is really cool, except if you want that one thing brought through that didn't happen there the way you thought. Yes. Yeah, when you're in 2010 mode, you're locked with what you had there.
Yeah, the question was, can you use the object model and use PowerShell to modify those scopes? And the answer is that you cannot.
Okay. All right. I think that's...
Yeah, just the final slide about evals. Thank you.
We've had questions, yes.
Lots of questions. And then please fill out your evals and give us lots of 5s.
Blatant pandering. Any other questions before we go? Comments?